Grab your cup of coffee or tea and get ready for this week's Crystal Connections radio show with your hosts Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini. Now your hosts of Crystal Connections radio show, Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini.
Hello and welcome everyone here to episode 2 of Crystal Connections, our radio program. I am Natalie Sabatini, and joining me today is Heather Caton. Heather, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us tonight.
Oh, and yours too, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and thank you for everyone that's listening. I'm so looking forward to just chatting tonight about crystal connections and the communication of geometry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important that everyone realize, that crystals themselves have a language, and part of that expression is through sacred geometry. So we're excited to share our ideas, our thoughts, and our research. Wouldn't you say, Heather?
Absolutely. So let's start, if we could, talking about, for those listeners who may be new, like, what is sacred geometry?
Yeah, good starting point there. So, sacred geometry, it's been seen as a system, a universal design, if you will, that is found all throughout our universe. It's a form of energy. It's the way that creation itself is organized. And many people, many cultures, religions would say that it's a sacred divine expression of that form. It can be used as a tool, and that's what we want to go ahead and really share with everyone today. I know there's different shapes, and they're basically the building blocks of creation.
Absolutely. And it's seen as like like you said, Natalie, the fundamental building blocks of our universe based on mathematics and form, and it can be found in all of nature. So if we take some time to think about it, how do we see this sacred geometry in our nation, just our natural world around us? Everything from the golden mean proportions to the Fibonacci sequence and spirals, the Platonic solids, and even in crystal structures. So I'm looking forward to getting in more detail about that tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I really enjoy about crystals in particular is the fact that we can use them as tools of initiation and remembrance. They're the on at least in this dimension, they're the 3D representation of these divine forms. And in a sense, when we use them, for example, and as the Platonic solids, which we'll be getting into, they're there to trigger memories. They're there to trigger memories and knowledge for people. So it kind of makes me wonder, what did the ancients know that we're beginning to rediscover about our universe, about the original source, about creation itself? And that's kind of some of the aspects that many of our scientists today are really rediscovering themselves, and they're trying to find that God particle, those sources of creation. Well, they're there for the student, they're there for everyone to really take the chance to and the opportunity to learn more about. Wouldn't you say, Heather?
Absolutely. So, and when you talk about different people and scientists and their backgrounds really honing into this idea. I mean, we're going to be talking about Merkaba, we're going to be talking about Vogel crystals. And if we want to break it down to some of the simplest forms and the easiest definitions of crystals and the way that they're grouped before we even get into some of the specifics in the Platonic solids, I mean, we're looking at crystals are grouped by lattices. So they're really simple shapes. And we can start by just talking about a few of those shapes that we recognize on a daily basis, from cubic or isometric shapes. These are found in octahedrons, dodecahedrons. Then we can move on to hexagonal, which a lot of people are familiar with, especially if you're connected to crystal formations. We're talking about the six-sided prism. And then we can get into the the triangle shaped, of course, our pyramids,
Mhm.
and work from there. And a lot of these shapes are seen in structures such as our temples and mosques and churches, different sacred spaces and altars, and just in our natural world itself. When we talk about the Fibonacci sequence, we're talking about spirals like shells and
Right.
trees and sunflowers and different things that we see throughout nature over and over and over again. So people have taken the whole idea of this geometry and this language that is out there and honed in on it, and then um, really done a lot of research and and learned a little bit more of how can we use these shapes and this sacred geometry, and how is it connected to us as humans, and
Mhm.
even used in things like healing. So
Right.
I know your Vogel crystals are is one that's really in social media. It's talked about, it's seen, and I know you have a bit of information to share about Vogel crystals.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you, you may or may not know, but Vogel crystals were actually based on the scientific research of a Marcel Vogel. He was a scientist at IBM, and he began, as you know, many of you may know, crystals are utilized in computers. You know, they're utilized in different forms of technology, and the scientists there were interested in how crystals can store energy, but apparently there's like an optimum, you could say certain shapes in particular at certain angles create the best, most refined energy. So many of our pyramids themselves have quartz as well that are also at the same, I believe it's 52-degree angle that Vogel himself actually utilized. And it's not just a matter of shapes, that's also important, not just angles, but also intent. So his intent
Mhm.
was to hold that refined frequency. So yeah, he for a number of years he experimented and learned about the field of luminescence, exploring the power of these quartz crystals. And if you've ever had the chance to hold one, you know that they're really great healing tools because of it. Many aspects of the body, they vibrate at that 52 hertz, I would say. Then it basically helps to repair many fluids in the body, tissue, bone. You start to notice that if applied properly with that frequency, there's repair. So that means that healing is occurring essentially at a molecular level.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcel Vogel, I mean, like you said, he was in IBM research for many years, and
Hmm.
he held number of patents in the field of
Definitely.
luminescence. That was his passion. But he
Hmm.
spent the later years of his life really exploring the powers of quartz crystal amongst his other interests. So really, like, when a lot of people might ask the question, well, what makes a Vogel crystal a Vogel crystal?
Right.
Because the name is out there, but what truly are you looking for if you were to go out and explore to maybe acquire one of these Vogel crystals? One, it's out of natural quartz,
Hmm.
so that is a must. It's hand cut with the necessary intent and skill to understand the crystal itself. It's usually double terminated, so there's a point that's polished on both sides of the crystal. And it's cut to a particular degree and a particular number of facets. And depending
Hmm.
on the number of facets that you have, it's connected to a certain part of that sacred geometry or that
Right.
certain number. So you have the 4-sided crystals, the 6-sided, the 8-sided, the 13-sided, and the 24-8 and the 24-12 sided
Hmm.
crystal. So those are connected to different parts of that shape, and then what they're aimed to be specifically towards. So, for example, the four-sided crystal in healing efforts aim to more of your physical body, like
Right.
the kind of like the cube. So we're talking about, that four-sided geometric shape right there. So we
Mhm.
can get more into that, but sure, he focused. If you're looking for a Vogel crystal, if you're interested in learning more about it, of course, it's quartz. They're usually hand cut, and they're usually the 4, 6, 8, 13, and 24 sided is what his particular focus was on.
Right. And something that I found to be quite interesting was that he said a Vogel crystal was characterized not just by those aspects that you mentioned, also too by it was connected to intent. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
the individual programming the crystal would make it so that anyone utilizing the crystal would not use it for evil intent or anything that was considered malicious, which is very interesting because if we go back to Atlantis and how, which people may or may not believe in or give much credence to, but let's just think of ancient civilizations. There was an understanding of how crystals were utilized for energy, for retrieval, storage of information, and we know that crystals were possibly used, well, potentially for power. So there's kind of a story behind it. So there must have been something that he realized to make him want to program these crystals so that they would only be used for either healing or beneficial aspects of the body. But another thing that you also mentioned, Heather, which it was a great remembrance there, the double faceted side. So a masculine and a feminine
Mm-hmm.
component to these
Yeah.
vocal crystals. Super important. So that kind of ties back into ancient Egypt, but also to the creation itself. Once again, it kind of reminds me of bringing in energy, but also being able to push that energy out. So accepting and also, expanding and contracting, essentially.
Absolutely. And, just to even further on what you were saying,
Right.
yeah, there's the feminine and the masculine,
No
like, oh,
worries.
tongue tied on that word, and the
Hmm.
masculine of the crystal. And him really honing in, just like you said, on the optimization of
Hmm.
healing and the information storage and transfer of that information. Of course, we know that crystal quartz has the capacity to store information as well as transmute
Right.
and to give that energy. And that's why crystals are used in everything from the credit cards that you use and computers and telephones. You would not have your cell phone or your computers without the utilization of crystals, because they have this amazing capacity to hold information, to store frequency, to have the capacity of being consistent with time. That's why they're used in watches, as
Right.
well.
Right.
And he really
Mhm.
honed on to this idea, and then the transference of that to our own human energies and our bodies. So
Right.
that's something that's really amazing about his research. And I would encourage all our listeners, if they're interested to learn more, to really, get online. They're amazing crystals, and
Beautiful.
to
Yeah.
find one that really speaks to them if they're interested in maybe utilizing one, um, and do a little bit of reading on the number of facets that have had that, the one that they choose has, and then how is that linked to maybe to them.
Right. No, absolutely. Because our universe is masculine and feminine, if you will, that a polarity of transmitter and receiver, which is really interesting because it also kind of leads into the subject of free energy, and Tesla and how he utilized crystals. And he himself believed that crystals had their own language, so to speak, their own form of existence that we just did not really understand, or we don't really understand. So that leaves an amazing area of research for us to further explore and learn more about. So, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
With
I
that being
know,
said,
we could do a whole show just on Vogel crystals.
we really could. We really could. I kind of want to get back into the subject of the Platonic solids, because let's all kind of think back a little bit, starting with our early education. At some point or another, many of us were exposed to shapes. If whether it was preschool, before that, kindergarten, you get your traditional shapes, your cubes, your pyramids, if you will, many different shapes, your spheres, and we might not have understood at that point what they were connected to, but in a sense, it's like we haven't forgotten, that they're there, they exist, and their purpose, at least to a certain point, how they connect to creation. So I kind of just want to go back into that. It's a fascinating subject, and I feel like even in schools nowadays, that should be something that we should really talk about. Even maybe possibly use crystals. A lot of schools nowadays are meditating. Why not incorporate the use of crystals and these Platonic solids, and kind of go into it a little bit, just as Plato did in his time?
Absolutely. So, for those that may be new to listening to the show, or they're not familiar with the Platonic solids, what are the Platonic solids? Well, we have 5 basic Platonic solids. So, we have the cube, we have the octahedron, we have the dodecahedron, we have the tetrahedron, we have the isohedron, and these really represent the building blocks of our universe. And Plato equated these 5 solids with the 5 elements, which was actually very interesting to me when I started doing a lot more reading and research about this, was the connection to the 5 solids with the 5 elements. So the cube was connected with the earth, the isohedron with water, the tetrahedron with fire, the octahedron with air, and then the dodecahedron with spirit. And that was a really fascinating concept to me when I had first learned and was getting into the Platonic solids and learning about crystals. And then it just really ignited something inside of me that I wanted to learn more about these, this 5
It's amazing.
solids connected to, just the 5 elements that we have. And my first question was, why do we have only 5 Platonic solids? Why aren't there more? That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
That I was presenting to myself. Why do we only have 5 Platonic solids? What makes one of the fundamental building blocks of this universe? Why is it one of those 5? Why isn't it 7 or 9? Or, what makes a Platonic solid? So, simply put, they're polygons. They're a 2-dimensional shape where all the sides and all the angles are equal. And they have flat faces, and on each face is the same shape or size. So they are the only shapes that we know of, that we can, that we're looking at today. Let me say this again, because we have to sort of digest this information. They're solid polygons. They're 2-dimensional shapes where all the sides and all the angles are equal. They have flat faces, and each face is the same shape or size. So Plato had theorized that these main elements, earth, fire, water, air, were directly related to these solids. And that was absolutely fascinating to me. So, I'm a teacher, and I get that question a lot when we're studying the sciences and these Platonic solids. Well, why is there only 5? Well, there's, a certain mathematical equation that absolutely makes it so, and it doesn't exist anywhere else in the universe. So that is why there are 5. And I found it fascinating they were connected to the elements.
And that's fascinating. I mean, we're literally talking about what man, meaning men, women, are composed of. We're composed of these elements which make up, the Merkaba, which I remember actually being in middle school and being exposed to the idea of sacred geometry, which ties once again into these Platonic solids, realizing that there was this like divine matrix that was composing our entire reality, and somehow it was perfect. And this ties right back into that concept, right back into DNA. The four building blocks, well, that's once again assuming you don't take spirit into account, right? And the creation itself seems to be built upon very simple aspects that are beautiful, perfect, and yet geometric at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So
Absolutely.
that being said, Heather, how did you feel when you kind of just digested the information yourself and you realized the magnitude of what you found, with these Platonic solids?
Well, I felt like I felt that I wanted to learn more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are these Platonic solids connected to our universe, to the building blocks of our universe? How are they connected to us as human beings
Mm-hmm.
and the way that we utilize them? And how did our ancients utilize the information and their knowledge about the Platonic solids in discovering, rediscovering, or in their own culture of what they were learning about
Mm.
or taking in, um, is very, very fascinating. So, like I said, you look at the building blocks of the universe, the Platonic solids and the shapes, and then you look at our cultures, you look at history, you look at art, you look at architecture, and you find over and over again across
Right.
oceans, across cultures, across time, that these shapes have been implemented before we had global communication. Yet
Mm.
we're seeing these shapes over and over and over again in our world. And so there has to be something to it. What is it? So you dig a little deeper and you discover that there's a mathematical equation that's happening. And within that mathematical equation seems to be a level of communication. So we think of mathematics, we think of harmonics, we think of music, um, as a way of communicating, right? It's a
Right.
communication, it's a language. So therefore, sacred geometry would also be a form of communication, a universal form of communication. So my interest then
Mm-hmm.
went down the rabbit hole of what is this language?
Mm.
And I want to learn more about it and understand it and how it's connected to our world, to the universe, and to me as a human entity. And in what ways can I utilize that, learn from it, and question uh, a lot that we have not discovered about it, and be open to those things. So that's
Yeah.
where where I started down a lot of research, and being able to connect that to crystals, and then utilizing those shapes, the sacred geometry, with healing, and with a human connection to it. So for myself, and what about you?
Which part?
I
um,
know, which part? I mean, you could go from your interest in sacred geometry, or your interest in its connection to healing,
mhm.
or its connection to our universe, or even beyond our universe.
There's a couple of things, at least on my end. One would be the harmonics, which ties once again back into that sacred geometry, but also the fact that it doesn't just apply to crystals. It can be applied to sound. It can be applied to fragrances, colors. There seems to be a natural symmetry that occurs across many different disciplines. And it's like you said, it's not just one culture, it's not isolated to one country, one nation. It's universal, not even just this planet. Even the planets themselves seem to have a harmonic resonance of sorts, like the dance of the spheres. And
Mm.
that to me is really fascinating because we're talking about a high level of aesthetics, of beauty, which many of our philosophers equate beauty with harmonics, like a certain level of harmony, in other words. And I find that to be quite true. Beauty is harmony, and harmony is a certain balance. I mean, I'm just astounded by the majesty of how how beautiful, how wondrous our creation can be. So I mean, no matter what's going on in my world, in my day, when I just pause and take a moment and think, wow, this our creation, our world, our universe is so incredible. The fact that we are here today, in every plant, you can find at the most minute, at the atomic level, you can find this perfect arrangement, this perfect symphony that's
Mm.
going on at all times. And it's so, I mean, if we just meditated even on that for a second, I mean, what else would you want? You know, you have knowledge there, and you could like delve deeper into it. It really makes a person pause, and think and reflect. Also, too, when I think of crystals on my end, at least, I just want to do the healing aspect. I'm thinking, how can we get our people from the current condition that they're at to an optimum level of health and well-being? And well, what is health? Health isn't just physical, it's mental. Well, we're also talking about magnetic fields, and perhaps if we knew more about ourselves, then things could change and our children would know more, and they could teach us in turn. It goes back and forth. So this subject is much more than just what people would term metaphysical. Now we're talking about a universal language. And that's kind of
Mm.
my goal, at least on my end, to learn more about the majesty of our universe, and which also leads me to the concept of time crystals. Very,
Mm.
very interesting subject there. Many of our scientists are trying to explore the anomalies behind these crystals. Their magnetic fields are different, than the typical crystal. But if you really think about it, each crystal sort of captures a moment in time, or a time space. Uh, it captures its creation and gives us a
Mhm.
glimpse into that moment, I'll say. So I find that to be quite fascinating because we literally have a source to access our past,
Mhm.
and who knows what else through these crystals.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a couple things that you said that brought me to a couple different
Yeah.
places when you were talking about our universe, and I started thinking about the rotation of
Mhm.
Venus around our sun, and in our whole Milky Way, just the
Right.
planetary alignments and the rotation of that there's such a beauty. And I've
Hmm.
seen a lot on social media. You can see the way that it's captured over the years, and how this symmetry happens just in the rotation and the alignment of the planets. And there's a beauty to it, there's a real
Right.
beauty, there's a quiet to it. And I think in our world today, for most of us in our life, that I have been feeling and witnessing today, it seems like there's so much coming at us, all this information. We're kind of in overload. And so a lot of us are just trying to find a balance with work, a balance with family, a balance with our volunteerism, balance with our passions, a balance with all those things. Like everyone's talking about, well, I just, wanting to find the balance. And there's a balance within the universe. So when you watch something um, like this happening, or you look at the simplicity of the Platonic solids or the sacred geometry that happens, all of a sudden you see this balance that's happening. So even within our own space, whether it's in our own life, whether it's in our community, whether it's in our, in as we are globally. There seems to be feeling a lot of chaos. So where do we find the balance? How do we hone back into that balance and find that space within
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and within ourselves as a community and as a global community? And I think this offers uh, a place to really think about it, to really
Right.
look at the bigger picture. Of course, when we're looking at the macro, we're also looking at the micro with ourselves and vice versa. And so it can be very a meditative place, a thoughtful place, and a reminder to ourselves that we are all part and an intricate part of the
Mm-hmm.
great design. And so within all of this going on in our lives right now, that we can have the capacity to find this symmetry and this balance.
Mm.
And looking into the crystals can help us energetically, um, to be able to help realign ourselves with those things, in our day-to-day lives. So I'm very interested in that as well, like
Yeah,
you.
no doubt. Scientists are discovering that our thoughts, they're based off like a light pattern, right? A biophoton. And we know that light, it's basically a photon. So if we're talking about living light, we are living light, and these quartz
Hmm.
crystals, they respond to light. So what else I mean, our earth itself is full of this quartz, which means that it's responding, it's alive, and it's responding to
Hmm.
every moment that we are either in balance or in chaos. So
Hmm.
that's another thing to think about, like you said. What are we choosing? Do we take that moment? Do we make that space and really, take the time to make make a choice? Um,
Hmm.
yeah, harmony and balance for sure.
Yeah, we know that it's not easy. It's kind of we're always in checks and balances, and trying to find that space within ourselves and our families and in our lives. So, um,
Mm.
people are very connected to things such as, we look at sacred geometry again. Let's look at the flower of life.
Okay.
We have seen this over and over again, the flower of life. What is the flower of life? How is it connected to sacred geometry? And, what is it and how can we utilize it? So we're,
Okay. Well, really quick. I mean, I'm sure you have more knowledge on it than I do. I just remember seeing it, a few times here and there. I'm familiar with it to a certain extent. When I see it, I see like the overlapping, circles, and they have like a certain, uh, they meet at a certain point, right?
yep.
But I also see the Vesica Pisces, and I'm
Hmm.
thinking, okay, well, the Vesica Pisces, I'm thinking Stargate, because I know that that's like what brings life in. So educate us, Heather. What is the flower of life here?
Well, and its connections to sacred geometry. I mean, we're
Hmm.
talking pi, we're talking the golden ratio, we're talking the Fibonacci sequence. This is the
Mm.
flower of life, where
Mhm.
life is being created. We look at our DNA, the
Mhm.
definition itself, of the flower of life. So it's a universal symbol. It's found in architecture. It's
Mhm.
found in literature around the world. It's said to contain all the patterns of creation. It's found in the most ancient cultures. And in its center, if you look at it, is a tiny dot. And through this tiny dot in the middle is progressing outward to form many, many complex three-dimensional structures.
Mhm.
This includes the five Platonic solids, which are the building
Mhm.
blocks of our universe. It is Jacob's ladder. It's the
Mhm.
Fibonacci spiral. It's the hexagons. It's the Star of David. It's Merkaba. So the flower of life, and sometimes seen within it, the tree of life,
Mm. Okay.
which we've seen throughout cultures and religions, is really seen as this place of sacred geometry where everything flowers from.
Mm.
So I love that you mentioned the stargates. Um,
That's what I
yeah.
see. I I'm gonna have to like meditate on it. I've seen it time and time and again on and off, but I'm really gonna meditate on this because I know there's something that can be explored there, and it's beautiful. I know that, but very interesting that it's also equated with the tree of life. So
Hmm.
that's new for me, and I look forward to learning more about that or its connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had talked about it before in a previous conversation. I mean, Tesla understood these concepts,
Hmm.
and he was utilizing crystals to bring forward different energy,
Right.
and earth energies to provide free energy for all. I mean, he was playing around with these ideas as well. Of course, crystals, we know, have the piezoelectric effect.
Hmm.
They are able to transmute and send energy. So if you take crystals, 2 crystal points, and be mindful, if you try this at home, you don't want to break your crystal points. But if you were to spark them, and you would get a spark from
Hmm.
them. So that's that piezoelectric effect that's happening, and that's energy, right? So
Right.
we have these amazing scientists in our past and present, and that were playing around with these ideas for these new forms of energy. And I think we've just really just hit the surface of how we
Right.
can utilize these things um, in our world today, which of course we've already tapped into because technology is unfolding, so quickly. But then, look to, if we want to even just take it a little bit deeper, I mean, look into our sci-fi books, movies, TV series, where they are also utilizing these entities of crystals um, for their energy resources, for their technological resources. Um,
Right.
everything from transporting. Let's look at things like Star Trek and everything like that, utilizing these crystals. And these were discussed and talked about for for years and years and years. A lot of people say this is new age information, and I say no, absolutely. This is ancient age that we're just now getting reacquainted with.
Right. No, absolutely. That brings me to it kind of sparks my memory here. Edgar Casey mentioned that in ancient Atlantis, their power sources were based off of crystals. And when I've meditated, I've seen these crystals, but I didn't just see one. I've seen them in different locations. And I know I just see them as almost like a powerhouse, power storage unit,
Mm,
kind of like how we have our nuclear energy facilities, but obviously more refined and beautiful. And also, too, we also know that there are certain stones, certain crystals that actually have like a ringing effect when they're exposed to
mm,
light. So that tells you that maybe we're not using the right energy, meaning the right interaction on our end with these crystals. Maybe we need to
mhm,
refine our thoughts a little bit more to be able to fully comprehend what they're capable of doing and what the ancients could
mhm,
do with it. You mentioned it's not just travel, not just, energy. There's something more here because I mean everything exists on a certain dimensional plane, and the way we see and perceive crystals at this time is in one particular form, but they exist in different dimensional realities. As you mentioned, the 2D form, there's a 3D. There must be a different form, just as we exist on different dimensional realities and different forms. I can't imagine what they look like on a higher dimensional scape.
I know. And the fact, I mean, that they're utilized, I mean, holding information, that's something that you mentioned with different crystals, and us just being open to the process and understanding of, well, how do they hold information? We know they hold frequency. We know through crystals that we're utilizing in our medical field currently. We use ruby crystals. We use different crystals for different scientific um, knowledge. And we
Mm-hmm.
know that crystals can hold information. We know we can program them with a particular frequency. Okay. And so, how do we tap into some of these crystals that may hold information keys?
Mm-hmm.
Were these utilized in ancient history to hold that are holding information? How do we tap into that? How do we
Right.
utilize that? Um, I mean, there's just so much that we don't know, but it's such an exciting field. And what's really exciting to me is, that not only did our ancients tap into this and start experimenting and talking about and utilizing them, but our modern day scientists, are also very much connected, tapped into, and wanting to further understand the science as well as the metaphysical properties
Right.
behind these crystals. And that is just an exciting world of science that's happening right now.
Oh, absolutely. I can't tell you the countless, peer-reviewed articles that I've looked at where they're studying, the symmetry of crystals, and they're utilizing laser technology to, like you said, kind of extract that piezoelectric effect on the crystalline lattices. I mean, there's so
Mhm.
much going on, and their applications are just growing every day. So, in the future, it's very likely that in our time that we'll be able to see the utilization of crystal technology, not just for the medical equipment, but also to start to cure cancer. Like I said, the applications are really just endless. Free energy, etc.
Absolutely. And we're just starting to tap into that. And isn't that exciting? I mean, to
Yeah.
me, that's just like, wow. So then that brings me to one of just our sacred geometry shapes. I want to talk about the Merkaba. The
Mm.
Merkaba, you may have seen it for our listeners on social media. You may have seen, if you're into crystals, you may have seen a lot of different crystals: amethyst, crystal quartz, rose quartz, but in that Merkaba shape. What is Merkaba? What is the sacred geometry behind it? What is it connected to? Um, I really want to get our listeners, just give them a basic form of information to just
Okay.
inspire them to go out and maybe do more research, because I know that if you're connected to anything in sacred geometry, in the crystal world, you're going to hear the word Merkaba. So let's chat about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The simplest way that honestly I can explain what it is, it's like a light vehicle, a divine vehicle that was used in ancient Atlantis, and it was used to explore different realities. That's what I can remember, anyways. People did it back then like it was just as easily as breathing. It was like a
Mm.
thing that everybody did as a family. They would take that moment, they would utilize that Merkaba, and they would explore. It was just done on a collective sort of level, individual, family level. So I think that's wonderful. It's also talked about in the Bible, though. Maybe you can kind of break it down for us, for our listeners today as well.
Sure. If you want to look at just taking the word Merkaba, let's break that down. So
Hmm.
means light, Ka means spirit, and Ba means body. So Merkaba means the spirit and body that's surrounded by light. It's
Hmm.
rotating by light. The wheels within wheels, which, if for our listeners, we know that the chakras are wheels, and we're going to get into that in just a little while. So there's spirals of energy in our DNA, and it transports from one dimension to another. So maybe a 2-dimensional to a 3-dimensional. The Merkaba creates an opportunity for us to thread our thoughts, through time, through time. You think about it as the Star of David in 3-dimensional, which means that we have 3D interlocking triangles.
Right.
So the realms of the intersecting of the and the merging of the divine of the human together. And it's a wondrous tool for self-healing. So it's triangles within triangles within triangles. So the Star of David with 3-dimensional interlocking triangles. So you're taking that sacred geometry and multiplying it, and it's been a magnificent healer and used that's connected with our DNA.
It kind of makes you wonder too, at our core, what are we? Are we a body? Are we a spirit? Which fundamentally, we're light, and
We're
which
energy.
manifests, right? Vibration, sound, but frequency, we are something amazing, something of, I can't even quite express it, but that's our existence. And in our form, we like you said, we're able to heal, we're able to move through. I kind of see it like a process of transmutation from one form to another. So that to me is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the Merkaba as, to me, it's sort of like a very high realm. Like you're taking those Platonic solids and they're being meshed and intertwined together to create something that is very highly communicative. It's very highly connected, and it has the capacity to really have a higher level of healing. And so the Merkaba for me personally has been in sacred geometry and utilizing that within the crystal formations and different and in different crystal forms. It for me has been a real opener, actually. So I want to talk more about that, the wheels and the connectedness to our DNA and our life form and our life force within us. So
Yeah.
sacred geometry and the chakras.
Well, as many of you know, we have some, well, depending on the discipline, but most schools see it as 7 different chakras, right? And with different corresponding colors. Now, once again, it just depends on which school that you look into, but in this particular case, we'll utilize the Platonic solids, and each one has or is connected to a particular element and chakra. So, Heather, I'm going to give this one to you because you're the expert on the Platonic solids here.
Yeah, I'm going to do our best. So we're going to focus first. Let's focus first on the Platonic solids, and then maybe we can get into the chakras because, of course, we want to utilize all the chakras and not just the ones connected to just the 5 Platonic solids. But
Sure.
first, let's just focus on the Platonic solids. So we're going to focus first on the cube, which is the 4-sided figure. That is connected to the earth, and it's associated with really grounding energies. Okay, so this has to do with our peace and our stability. So, for example, if you were to go out and get a Platonic solid set, and you can get them in crystal quartz or, whatever crystal form you are maybe connected to, the cube itself would be connected to the earth. That's the grounding one. The next, which is the octahedron, that is connected to air. and it's associated with our goals. It's related to communication. It's related to travel and intellectual pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have fire. I hope everyone has their pencil out writing this down. We'll
Right.
have to maybe post it on a website for everyone or on our face page, which is the tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron linked to the fire element, and it's used really to promote vitality, strength, courage, and energy. This is the heart chakra. So this is the element of air. So let me just reemphasize for those that may be taking notes. We have the cube, which is
Mm-hmm.
the grounding. That is our root chakra. And that
Okay.
is about fertility. It's about abundance. It's about our stability. So that is that four-sided cube. We have the air, which is the octahedron right there. That is with our goals related to communication, travel, intellectual in our intellectual pursuits. We have the tetrahedron. This is strength, courage, vitality.
Mm-hmm.
This is connected to our solar plexus. That's about a little bit below our belly button. So it holds the energies of our personal power and our prosperity. Okay, so that's that yellow chakra, the tetrahedron right there. And we have water, which is the isohedron, and that's associated with peace. It's about compassion. It's about love. It's about connecting with, if you have trouble sleeping, with having restful sleep.
Okay.
And then we have the dodecahedron, and that is connected to spirit. That is that third eye chakra, and that's about holding communications to more spiritual realms and being open to those things right there. I would say the Merkaba, because I would suspect that people will go, what about the Merkaba? You just talked about that.
Yeah.
That would be the crown chakra above the head, the element of spirit that connects us to all the planes and facilitating us to our higher selves and that communication right
Mm.
there. So I hope that's helpful for people. And just on a basic level of understanding the Platonic solids, and if you were to get, a set of the Platonic solids, how do I use them? What are they connected to as far as my chakras? And, where do I use them in order to strengthen or balance those places within me? So,
Yeah, that's absolutely completely wonderful, Heather. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, even if you are not very familiar with, let's say, the particular chakra, and if you know you have a certain situation or something that you're concerned about, whether it's a physical ailment or a psychological one, um, even just taking a moment to meditate on the shape itself, I would be very interested in kind of getting people's feedback on what they're feeling, what their experience was with
mhm.
it, because I would imagine that it'd be quite therapeutic. It just has to be, because of the nature of our reality and how even the image of it or the 3D object itself would be kind of triggering in a sense, or maybe the word isn't triggering, but it would help spark a remembrance of something. I mean, our DNA itself holds and encodes quite a bit of information, and it has for generations, right from the beginning. So if you are at any point drawn to these Platonic solids, or even once again, the Merkaba, feel free to take these shapes, meditate on them, and see what they will be able to do for you.
Mhm. Absolutely. And and then, the next question might be, well, I got platonic solids, but I got them all in crystals, or I got them all in they all came in rose quartz or amethyst, or they all came in tiger eye, and maybe I want to play with different stones
Mm,
within that. So, the cube just as an example, which is connected to the root chakra, that's that ideal of sacred space. It's the ideal of safety. It's the ideal of those elements that you're wanting to align. If you're wanting to get a particular stone for that, look for stones that are really grounding, like jasper, like jet, like obsidian,
Smoky quartz.
Smoky quartz. I love smoky quartz, those grounding elements within that shape. We have examples for the sacral chakra, for the solar plexus. That's that fire element right there. That's that one in your belly button right there. That's that personal power. So, yellow jasper, citrine, in that toe tetrahedron shape, is going to be amazing right there. Shapes like the Merkaba, and I would even add above that the sphere, which you might find in your set as well, which is a further discussion. Those to have in amethyst, to have in crystal quartz, to have in those really high vibrational stones, to connect to your higher self. There's a spiritual element to it, and just to help realign, and that important word that we're all talking about, that bringing together that balance of sacred geometry, using it with crystals, and that connectedness to our earth and you as a human being. So that would be, sort of take notes, and please, we welcome a lot of comments and questions.
Any insight?
Absolutely.
Well, Heather,
and experiences that people have had.
Right. We're down to our last 3 minutes, and I kind of just want to go back into something that we've spoken about before. Whether you buy a set or not, follow your spirit. If you're drawn to a particular color, a particular crystal, mineral, there's a reason for it. You might not acknowledge it in that moment or know it, but follow your spirit. There's something there that's quite tangible. And we talked a little bit about it in our first episode as to how to do that, how to follow our natural instinct when selecting or looking into crystals. They kind of choose you in a sense.
Yeah, they do.
So, right. So feel free to explore that, be open to the experience, and you might find yourself on a crystal journey yourself in the process.
Absolutely. I love that, Natalie, because no matter how long that I've been involved with this, I still feel like I'm on my crystal journey. And there might be a particular year where I go, yeah, I'm really connected to this one. And for some reason, this one is calling me and I need this stone. And sometimes I don't even know why. And so that's the one that I'm seeking. And you are absolutely right. Sometimes they find you. You don't necessarily find them. So my advice in our last 2 minutes, be open to the process, follow your heart, be open to the shape and the language of sacred geometry and the communication that it has for you and within yourself and its connectedness to our universe. And utilize that space and just be open to just free and explore.
Yeah, wonderfully. And I love the way you said it, Heather. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, we look forward to your input, and join us for the next episode of Crystal Connections. I'm Natalie Sabatini with Heather Caton. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you for listening to Crystal Connections Radio Show with Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini on OWGN, Otherworld Global Network. Remember to visit and like the OWGN Facebook page and subscribe to the free newsletter for more show notifications.